What is up, guys? Doing another one down solo. Today I'm doing Firestarter with no downs, no assets, no AI, no converts, the whole 9 yards. So, interesting thing, day 1 wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. Which was, maybe I should have been able to predict, but the dynamic of it was a little bit interesting. Due to the layout and size of the map, it's pretty easy to run circles, essentially, and just kite enemies around the map by going through the back alleys and so forth, and not allowing yourself to have a lot of movement and running room, just, to be able to go places and do whatever and get away from all the enemies, which was really handy, especially since you needed to move 8 bags, whether or not you blow them up or put them in the van or what have you. It is a lot of bag moving, which is kind of a major headache, especially when you're doing no down runs. Moving bags can usually get you caught in a lot of situations that you really don't want to be in because of the loss of mobility and so forth. It's pretty unfortunate I didn't have any weapons in this truck after I put a C4 thing on it, so I didn't even bother putting a C4 charge on the other truck. I wanted to save it for the other hangar just in case. I do have 2 shaped charges because I am packing those as secondaries. I like having them as utility, not just on this heist in particular, but just on lots of different heists. Even just having 1 or 2 shaped charges can be really beneficial. I have switched from my normal perk decks of either Rogue or Sicario, and I guess Kingpin there for a while, and I have opted into using Anarchist for these runs. I've recently become a big believer in Anarchist. I've talked with several different people about it, and who have all said, hey man, maybe you should really give this a try, it might be worthwhile, especially since you're doing no down stuff, because it's really consistent. And I was like, I'm just not used to it is the problem, so I just kind of bit the bullet, practiced around with it, kind of like I did with Kingpin a while back, and found it to be working extremely well, better than most of the other perk decks, at least in certain scenarios, at the very least it is more consistent, which was fun. Of course, it also allowed some greater build versatility since I didn't have to put a few extra points in the dodge, so I was able to kind of save a handful of points there. Thankfully, I did get some weapons in this truck and had the gas tank just on the other side of this hangar, which is pretty fortunate. So if you notice, or as you probably noticed, I am using Frenzy and Berserker on this build. Get some of the extra DPS necessary in order to do no down runs. No down runs really get a lot of traction, or I'm sorry, no down builds get most of their traction from just your ability to, instead of putting points into things that would give you extra survivability, instead putting them in things that allow you to absolutely demolish the enemies that are in front of you. And so that's definitely what this build focuses on. With Anarchist, it slightly hurts your survivability using Frenzy, but for the most part your armor is basically your health. And really the only major issue that I've run into while using Frenzy is just that snipers completely demolish you, which can happen at any point in time with Anarchist, so it's not really even that big of a change. But Anarchist works extremely well, so I mean it is one of the best perk decks in my humble opinion. Definitely takes out the bit of random element that Rogue does. However, Rogue still does allow you to get pretty lucky and do some crazy things, with your decision making and so on and so forth. Now, you can't do that to the same extent with Anarchists. You usually have a 2-second invulnerability grace period every now and again, which is good, don't get me wrong. It allows you to move from cover to cover through sticky situations, which is really handy. It however does lack a method to push objectives super hard, such as Kingpin or Sicario does with either the injector or with the smoke grenade. So you're throwing out a few tools in terms of certain types of clutchness. Not to say Anarchist isn't clutch, because it can be pretty clutch. And some other things for some consistency, which is really nice. And really the only enemy type you really have to worry about are heavy SWATs, which you just kill really fast, and snipers, which you can memorize the positions of on maps. It's quite different than Kingpin in the scenario where, you know, you're having to, oh shoot. Where with Kingpin, a dozer can be anywhere that you are, and it just takes one shot from the dozer and then you're down, and it's bad for no down runs. Or, I shouldn't say Kingpin is bad for no down runs, however, it's just very difficult to... It's much more aggravating than it should be. I'll put it like that. Of course, I had to take it pretty slow and steady throughout most of this. I had to cycle around the map a lot. I definitely wanted to sit down and cover whenever I was waiting for my grace period to recharge, so that I had, you know, I could use that as I'm moving to and from cover. I am using the suit, and I don't have any armor boosting skills, so such as Iron Man basic and things like that, which would help a little bit in terms of taking damage from heavy SWATs, maybe taking one extra shot if my armor was at full. However, I'm not really too terribly concerned about that. I am definitely a bit larger fan of the continuous armor regen ticks every 2 seconds. And so it's interesting in the sense that even once my invulnerability grace period is down, even if I haven't shot anybody, I am going to get a little bit of armor back at the end of the 2 seconds, or really close to the end of the 2 seconds, which could be the difference between having that one extra shot I need to get behind cover and let my grace period recharge and all that good stuff. But anyway, so for the most part, of course, my weapon choice, I used this weapon, these two weapons in my previous videos where I was doing both Cook-Off and Hoxton Revenge, if I'm not mistaken. This heist was a bit more of an undertaking, but still pretty straightforward. It has great kill power. I do have crits. I'm not using Unseen Strike. I felt like going for Unseen Strike on top of everything else I was using just really added a bit more than I could chew. And I just didn't have the points for it, I don't believe. I also wanted this build to have a little bit of versatility, or extra utility, with, you know, jack of all trades and things like that. Honestly, I probably could get rid of the Berserker skills and all that good stuff and just get Unseen Strike instead. However, the Berserker, I know for a fact, even though 65% chance of crits, you know, combined with Low Blow and with Unseen Strike. Unseen Strike, if I take any sort of damage, I have to wait for the cooldown and all that, or I have to wait 4 seconds before I get that extra crit chance. So Berserker overall is just a bit more consistent in that regards. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, however, it is a bit more consistent. And I will show the builds that I used at the end, or I'll show the build that I used at the end of the video. Forgot to mention that, since I think Payday 2 Tools is still kind of on the fritz, and it's just easier that way if people watch the whole video and that they don't look for the build in the description and all that good stuff. Although I think I'll still put the builds in the description, I just won't put the weapon loadouts. The weapon loadouts are usually pretty straightforward. So
here's a first aid kit.
I was a little sad that I was actually going to have to put a drill down in order to get the last few remaining bags that I needed. I wanted to try to get them between, blowing open 2 trucks and just the loose weapons that were in the hangars. However, I didn't get lucky with one of the trucks that I blew open. It didn't have any weapons in it whatsoever, so I did have to drill open this one, which wasn't that big of a deal. It just tacked on a little bit of extra time and some waiting, which I wanted to try to avoid at all costs. I did have Hardware Expert Basic, though, which allowed me to, shave a little bit of time off of repairing the drill. So, which makes a bigger difference than you would imagine. 3 seconds or like 2.5 seconds can make a world of difference when you're, just sitting there out of cover, usually, and just kind of twiddling your thumbs trying to repair a drill and all that good stuff. The trucks were actually really good in terms of cover. Even though the fronts are wide open, the weapon selection I have just allows me to clear out enemies who are in front of me pretty reliably, so I don't have to worry about enemies just running out in front of me. I do find myself wishing that I could use the I mean, I probably could use the stakeout with this loadout, except I'm going to be missing some of the crits, which actually help the HE more than it does the Yzma. It still helps the Yzma in terms of killing dozers and things like that. Not to say that the Yzma's bad at killing dozers without crits, because it's not. However, it does speed up the process pretty handily, saves yourself a bit of ammo, and all that good stuff. So, and I only had to get, you know, the basic version of low blow, so it's only like 3 points that I had to spend, so it's not like a big, you know, investment in my build. Although I did have to put some points into, what is that skill? Optical Illusions Aced, in order to get as low of a detection rating as I do. So actually, I guess technically it's a 7-point investment, because I had the 4 points in Optical Illusions Aced, and then the 3 points in low blow basic. Regardless. Crits are nice. I like them, so I keep them. But yeah, the reason I would slightly prefer the stakeout to the Yzma is just because of the slightly larger magazine. Those 13 extra shots can come in handy when you're being swamped by a whole bunch of enemies. Yzma's reload speed isn't bad by any means. However, its dry reload can be a bit aggravating to deal with if you're cleaving through enemies and you just need that one more shot. So, of course, you know, I'll just switch to the HE Judge instead and just clean out the rest of the enemies that way. Trying to slowly work my way over into this back balcony in the warehouse, or not balcony, but in this little area here so that I could see if there are any weapons. And thankfully there were 2, which I believe were all I needed at this point, if I'm not mistaken. It's definitely a scary thing about these no-down runs is usually any enemy, aside from like a shield who just barely deals any damage to you, once your armor is down, it's just going to destroy you. So, you know, your health is is kind of just there as a luxury, not even as a, or more as a necessity than anything else. It really doesn't offer any extra cushion for some extra damage. It might in certain circumstances, but in most cases, you know, once your armor's down, a heavy SWAT, a taser, I believe a medic as well, most units should still kill you pretty readily once your armor's completely down and you don't have any invulnerability or anything like that. So, normally I would have liked to get fully loaded aced with a loadout like this. If I didn't have Frenzy and Berserker and all that good stuff, I probably would have fully loaded ace just so I could pick up extra concussion grenades to use to cover myself as I'm moving from cover to cover. It's really handy, like beyond ridiculously handy. I don't realize how much I miss concussion grenades until I run out. And I'm like, oh, well, I could really use one of those right about now. But I think just the sheer, in terms of sheer the amount of damage that I'm dealing to these enemies, it's probably going to be more worthwhile in the long run to stick with Frenzy and Berserker and all that stuff. I don't know. I'll experiment around and like play with a build that utilizes Frenzy and Berserker, and then one that utilizes like fully loaded aced and all that good stuff. Which, I mean, I have them. I've just been messing with. I've been messing with all sorts of builds because, you know, I do the build videos and I've been doing these runs and just all that good stuff, just trying to find stuff that works out, playing with different perk decks, trying to see what combinations work best. So I just kind of randomly sat down and decided I wanted to do Firestarter. Managed to grind out day 1 pretty quickly. It only took like 2 attempts, I'm pretty sure. First attempt was getting my feet wet. Just kind of seeing what the... It's interesting because Firestarter, if I'm not mistaken, was the very first run that I ever did. Period, like on this channel. If you go back, it's probably, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Firestarter was my first video. It was just a standard 1-down solo, and I was like talking with my friends over Discord while I was doing it. And so the video itself isn't super good. However, it's been a while since I've done the run, and I kind of forgot how the you know, the strategies and things you have to do are a little bit different when you're tackling a different scenario like this. Because back at that time, you know, I had a very, I would consider kind of a volatile way of, you know, pushing objectives and stuff. I would willingly sacrifice my downs so that I could push objectives harder and move areas through areas faster and so on and so forth to save myself some time. But with this, I don't have the luxury of doing so, and I have to be very methodical and very careful. Which is fun. Definitely requires more thinking and better play, of course. Wouldn't necessarily say that it's leaps and bounds harder, like infinitely harder. However, there is a certain level of extra challenge to it because of how easy it is to have a run soiled just by getting two-shot. Well, it's harder to get two-shot with Anarchist, which is why I've enjoyed using it recently. So. And I mean, with dodge-oriented perk decks, it's pretty easy to get. It is easy to get two-shot. However, your odds are the odds aren't super high of it happening, but it can happen. And with Kingpin, getting two-shot rarely ever happens, except in the cases of dozers, in which case you just get one-shot. And it just really sucks. Like, that's the one thing keeping me from utilizing Kingpin more. In these no-down videos is just the fact that I can't deal with dozers fast enough in order to not go down. And of course, I know the first aid kits are there to, you know, prevent me from going down, but if I have to use a first aid kit to keep myself from going down every single time I run into, you know, a dozer or a pair of dozers, that's automatically going to be like 4 or 5 at best. Well, I would assume at best. First aid kits that I'm just having to burn just to protect myself from dozers, as opposed to, you know, keeping them on objectives or places of cover or whatever. It's just kind of it's kind of cumbersome. But maybe I can figure something out. Maybe I can find a way that I can just completely obliterate dozers super duper fast. I don't know. I'll keep playing with it, see what I can get. A big problem with it is just that I can't get any sort of like Frenzy or Berserker skills because it completely just nullifies the effectiveness of Kingpin when you're using the injector, because it lowers your total health pool technically. You know, you can't heal above a certain percentage of health, so, you know, if you got shot for more damage than whatever that amount of health is, then you die. So normally that's like 440 something for Kingpin, because that's what you have at max health. But, you know, that gets chopped down to 30% of that. And so any enemy that deals more than 30% damage at like 440 something, like 442 or something like that, you know, it's going to kill you in one shot. And it just completely negates the effect, even though your DPS is way better, because most of the enemy units are going to deal more damage than that, or at least the heavy SWATs are. I decided to abandon the bag because I was getting a little, getting really low on ammo, at least with my Yzma. I needed to get out of that situation and decided to go back over here to pick up this other bag and throw it into the gas can, or into the gas tank rather, so I can go ahead and get that out of the way. I think this is the last bag. It's either the last bag or the next to last bag. However, I did have to use my HE Judge as my only real weapon here, which is fine because I was able to knock the enemies over so I could get inside the truck, which is what I was intending on using it for. You know, I wasn't going to try to like kill the enemies with it. I just wanted to knock them over so I could run through and get some of these ammo pickups. I usually don't have a lot of issues with the ammo on the Yzma or anything like that. These were kind of extraditing circumstances. I wasn't, you know, I was killing certain enemies that were kind of far away and then wasn't going out to get the pickups and things like that. I was just trying to keep the enemies off me as best I could. There wasn't a lot of close quarters fighting going on. Usually on maps where there's a lot of close quarters fighting, you know, it's really easy just to keep your ammo up. However, it's a little bit more difficult. You know, when you're having to shoot enemies that are further away and all that good stuff. As you saw there just a second ago, I made the choice to abandon killing the dozer and instead aim for the heavy SWATs because, at least when I'm playing Anarchist, it's way easier to go down by the heavy SWATs than it is to go down by the dozers, just because of the way that the armor regen ticks work and, you know, all that good stuff. The heavy SWATs are a much more pertinent threat to deal with than dozers are. which sounds kind of counterintuitive, you know, because I was talking a few minutes ago about, you know, Kingpin, it's worse, you know, it's hard to do no down runs because of dozers, but I'm also saying that, like, the most common enemy type on one down is one of the biggest struggles for anarchists, but, you know, in the same vein, it's way easier to kill the heavy swats in like 1 or 2 shots as opposed to, you know, dozers in 5, 6, or 7 with Kingpin, where the dozers have ample time to just completely obliterate you. So, if I'm not mistaken, that should have been the last bag. No, one more. Gosh, I can't count. Yeah, but I did have the one bag over in the alleyway that was already moved a good majority of the way. I just needed to go grab it and run it up to the van really quickly. And the wave was over, which gave me a bit of time I needed to really run and push that before the enemy started swarming in again. I was trying to keep in mind, though, that there were going to be a handful of pretty weak units up on the hill, because they usually spawn like during or after the first wave or something like that. But usually those units are like 720 health units, and they normally don't deal that much damage to you, so yeah, there they were. I was just able to cleave them through pretty quickly and just go ahead and throw my weapons in and move on to day 2. I'm going to take a quick look at my stats. So I was pretty pleased with how easy day 1 went by. And actually, the hardest day of this run was day 2. Day 2 gave me so much grief for a variety of reasons. You see here I'm using a different build, and I'm going to cheese this pretty hard, actually, but it's because this day was infuriating me. I kept getting to the end, but moving the servers across the road, even between the waves, was so excruciatingly difficult just because the enemies, they spawn at the road, and enemies will also, like, there'll be a handful of units that camp out on the road at all times that won't move from the road. Like, they'll just be stationed there. I guess they're scripted spawns or there's something. But there'll be, you know, weak cops up the road because they'll spawn in from their cop car, and then there'll be some heavy SWAT units, some heavy ZEAL units, whatever, just hanging out on the road, a medic usually, maybe a taser, but usually it's like a medic and a few heavy SWATs. And it's just it was so incredibly aggravating to deal with, because even when I killed them, I almost never had enough time to slowly lug my way over with one server to the van, move back across, and then, you know, wash, rinse, repeat for the second server. It was just, honestly, it was so much trouble, and was so griefing, and I was loathing it, and I put so many attempts into it, and I was like, this is absolute trash and garbage, and I hate this. So instead what I opted to do was streamline this as much as I could by bringing ECMs and bringing a saw, so that I could lower, the barrier that you have, or the security barrier that you have to drill through, so I wouldn't have to, well, obviously, so I wouldn't have to drill through it. And also the saw to open the doors, so that way whenever the alarm did go off, because I knew I wouldn't have enough time to completely ECM rush it, and I wasn't going to, like, stealth it, I was just going to push it. I'd have enough time to move the bags between assault waves, which honestly was just the best way to go about it, as far as I'm concerned, and I really don't care if it's not, like, you know, I didn't kill hundreds and hundreds of units while I was doing this day in particular, but that's perfectly fine with me, because it really, really was aggravating. Decided to leave that particular server there, so I could go back and grab the other one. Just so they'd both be a bit closer to the van, so I could throw one in, sprint back, grab the other one, and throw it in, and not have to, I don't know, it just made sense in my head. Thankfully, I was able to get both of these, or get like the first one, and then halfway across with the second one before the assault even technically really started. Enemy units were coming in, but it was like the build phase of the assault. I don't think it got to the point of being in sustain or anything like that. I really just wanted to push through this day, get it over with, move on to day 3, which I knew was going to be the easier day. I never anticipated that day 2 was going to be this aggravatingly difficult, and it only is aggravatingly difficult because there were 2 servers to move and how slow you move with the servers. So there was day 2 in a pseudo-loud fashion. Definitely made that as easy as I possibly could on myself. And then, of course, switched back to my other build for day 3. Day 3, of course, was going to be a a breeze because it's basically just bank, except you don't even have to get any loot. So day 3 is really straightforward. For some reason, I was scrolling through the assets like I was gonna get something, and I was like, "Oh wait, I'm doing this with no assets. What am I? Why am I doing this to myself?" But yeah, day 3 of course is really straightforward. It's just the harvest and trustee bank. The only difference being you don't have to secure any loot. You just have to burn the money bag and sit in the vault for a minute. So I have my shape charges as secondaries again, so that I can pop open the inner gate of the vault in case it spawns. I also, of course, want to get the key card from the manager or from his office, so I can go ahead and turn off the electrified vault door, so I don't have to worry about drilling that door open. Makes it a bit easier on myself. I wanted to have the security room to hunker out in because, you know, it's just a good spot to hold out. However, of course, there's only one key card that spawns on the map unless you get the insider asset to get the second one, but wasn't using assets, and I didn't have the inside man skills anyway, so. But it wasn't a big deal. I just put a drill down on it and waited. It usually takes a minute and a half, or it takes a little bit before the assault really kicks in on bank anyway, which is pretty nice. I don't think I ever actually end up getting into it though. I just managed to camp out somewhere else. I did want to double check and make sure where the van location was before I got too much farther. I was recording a video the other day for a build that I might upload just because I think it'd be funny. It wasn't like a character build video. It was just another like kooky build idea that I had, or a themed build sort of thing, but not around one of the characters. But anyway, and I got to the end of the heist. Like I got to the very end. I did the whole heist, the bank heist, of course, and I had my bag of gold, and I was moving out to the van, the far van, the one that spawns at the end of the street. And then I pretty much got there, looked up after I very precariously moved all the way over, and then realized that I was at the wrong van spawn. I had just anticipated that it was going to be the worst van spawn possible, and went to the wrong spot, and I was just standing there like, are you kidding me? So I had to go to the other end of the map because it was the van that's in the corner, and actually the direction I'm facing, was that van spawn. I worked all the way back there and then got tased and got shot down while I was right before I had crossed the street. So I was just kind of like, well, that whole like build video just went down the toilet because of that. And I had spent, you know, a decent amount of time like actually on the video in the run because I wanted to get plenty of footage for it because it was fun, all that good stuff. I think I still have the video tucked away somewhere on my computer. I might upload it, but I really don't like putting up runs that don't have, you know, that end in failure. Even if it is just a build video to show off the build and not actually the, you know, the success of the heist. But still. Just makes me feel better, I guess. Was really happy to go ahead and get this heist done, though. It wasn't really on, like, my to-do list or anything. I was just like, oh, you know what, I'm going to try that, because, you know, I have shape charges as secondary deployables, so it ended up working out really nicely. It's really funny, because there are other heists that I've been trying to do, like, no downs run on and stuff like that, and heists that are normally just considered ridiculously easy in terms of, you know, loud heists and things like that. Attempting them with no downs still seems like it wouldn't be that difficult, but just the sheer fact that you can't push very key objectives because you can't risk going down actually like completely changes some of the tactics you have to use on the heist, which is really funny and really interesting if you ask me. So like things that normally wouldn't be that big of a deal at the end of certain heists, like moving bags at the end of Hawks and Revenge or something like that, suddenly become way harder and way more important because you have to take it so slowly and so carefully, and you have to be sure not to, you know, overextend yourself, and, you know, you have to make smart decisions so that you don't get yourself screwed over in a really bad situation just trying to wrap up the last 2 or 3 minutes of a heist. But I'll talk more about that, you know, in those videos as they come along. Overall, this one wasn't too terrible. I mean, day 2 looked really simple because, you know, I just decided to ECM/SAW rush it, even though I let it go loud and all that good stuff at the very end. like I said, I wasn't intending on stealthing it. I just wanted to push through it as fast as I could because I was really tired of trying again and again to do it the good old-fashioned way, and it wasn't working. I'd actually tried several different things. I had packed shape charges as a primary and then first aid kits as my secondary so that I could blow open the door instead of having to drill it and then only have to drill open the second door. The only problem, like, I could get to the servers really consistently. Getting to the servers wasn't a problem at all. The only problem was once I got out to the street with the first server, that's pretty much where all of the runs, or all of the attempts on day 2 failed, because there was next to no cover out there. You have to clear out enemies even between waves. And it's just... And of course snipers can spawn, and snipers and anarchists are bad. And I had a few where I just wasn't expecting the sniper, even though I knew they were going to be there. Or like, I knew that there was a good chance the sniper was going to spawn there, but I was so focused on killing the enemies in front of me that I wasn't thinking about the snipers. And then the sniper just pew, and I died, and just like, well, this is lame. But it's all good. I managed to cleave through it pretty quickly with the method that I used. And I'm proud of it. Well, not really, but, you know, whatever. I got it done. I was able to hold out the copier room a bit better than I thought I was going to be able to. I thought it was going to be hard because I'd have to, you know, like, protect both sides, but it really wasn't all that bad. Most of the enemies kind of just chose to come in through one way, and then if they charged in through the other way, I just turn my head slightly and shoot in that direction instead. So it worked out just as well as a security room would have. And sometimes it really helps too, not to stay in a really small room and try to keep that secured, just because the small rooms can get kind of finicky if you get rushed by too many enemies at one time. And you don't have anywhere to run, and the door gets clogged up and stuff like that. I've had that happen a few times. Which is why I opt to use these, you know, the shotgun combination, because it's really easy to clear out clusters of enemies as opposed to anything else. So they gassed me out of my one area, so I had to come into this area. Not a big deal, but I was able to situate myself in the corner and be pretty protected there, so far as I could tell anyway. Didn't have too much longer before the vault opened up anyway. Of course, the vault's really secure, pretty spacious room to run around in so you don't just get melee jostled by enemies. Of course, thankfully I packed shape charges so I didn't have to sit through another drill, which wouldn't have taken that long, but just saves, you know, 2 or so minutes of time. So now, of course, just waiting for the stack of money to burn and all that good stuff. The vault door is really easy to keep clear of enemies. Using the HE Judge once it starts to get clogged, and using the Yzma to kind of push enemies out and keep them away. I have messed with using grenade launchers as opposed to the HE Judge, and it still works relatively well. I guess really the only difference is just the difference in reload times and the radius of effect, and that's really the best way I can think to explain it too, is just the HE Judge has a smaller radius of explosion but a much faster reload time. So like an itty-bitty grenade launcher, and then the actual grenade launchers, you know, have a slightly longer reload time, but have a much larger radius of effect. And even though like something like the China Puff and the Arbiter don't necessarily have really long reload times in their own right, you know, all it takes is just a second to get completely overwhelmed by enemies and not have your weapons ready to shoot. So trying to minimize, you know, amount of reload times and increasing mag size and things like that, so you can always be ready to shoot. Not to always be shooting, but just to always be ready. That's what you really want to stress, is you want to be prepared to react and shoot and kill enemies as fast as humanly possible. I've been caught in more scenarios than I'd like to admit, where I was just simply reloading either one gun or another, and then not be able to get myself out of the situation because I just get killed while I was reloading or whatever. But still had plenty of concussion grenades and had my invulnerability, so I could go ahead and run across the street and get into the escape van And that's all she wrote. We'll take a quick look at my stats. Alright guys, that was Firestarter with, you know, no downs, no assets, no AI, no converts, the whole 9 yards. So we'll quickly go ahead and, you know, go through the weapon mods and the build really quickly. I'm really a big fan of this loadout. It's so much fun. So of course, using the Yzma, I'm also using the Judge. So in the Yzma, I'm using Buckshot, I'm using Auto Fire, the Short Barrel, the Silent Killer, Suppressor, Concealment Boost Modifier. I'm using the Hollow Handle, the Assault Light, the Rubber Grip, and the Skeletal Stock. For the Judge, I'm using HE Rounds, Silent Killer, Suppressor, Concealment Modifier, and I think I had a laser on it. I don't know why I had a laser on it. I don't use lasers. So, lots of shotgun skills, Bullseye, Scavenger Aced, of course I had Uppers Aced and all that good stuff, Jack of all trades Aced, Hardware Expert Basic, Shockproof Aced, Silencer skills, and then of course, you know, going in and getting Frenzy Aced. But anyway guys, that was Firestarter, and as usual, thank you so much for watching.